In the beginning, there was no Olympus, no earth, no sea, no sky. There was only chaos. And chaos was not the kind of chaos modern tongues describe. Disorder, confusion, frenzy. It was older than language itself. Chaos was a yawning void, a gaping nothingness without form or direction. It was not evil, nor good, nor even neutral. It simply was. From that ancient nothing came the first stirrings of existence. Gaia, the earth, vast and unshaking. Tartarus, the abyss beneath the earth, dark and dreadful. And Eros, the force of love and desire, the binding agent of all future creation. These were not gods as we think of them, not yet, but elemental truths given form. Then came Nyx, the night, clothed in a shadow so thick even chaos recoiled. She was followed by Erebus, the darkness of the underworld, who would dwell beside her in that early silence. From the union of night and darkness came ether, the pure upper air breathed by the gods, and Hemera, the day, who from the beginning was fated to chase her mother endlessly across the sky. Thus the cycle of night and day was born. Gaia, the earth herself, did not lie idle. She was patient and fertile, and from her own body she brought forth Uranus, the sky, vast and star-strewn. He was both her son and her consort. And when he arched over her, stretching across the heavens, the world found its first shape, a domed sky above, a broad and endless plain. Together, earth and sky, Gaia and Uranus became the first great pair. Their union brought forth the Titans, the first generation of powerful beings who would rule the cosmos. There were 12 Titans in all, 6 sons and 6 daughters. Oceanus, the encircling river, Hyperion, the Lord of Light, Coeus, the Inquirer, Cronus, youngest and most cunning, and among the daughters, Rhea, future mother of gods, Thamus, embodiment of divine law, Mnemosyne, the memory of all things. But Gaia's womb was not finished with them. She bore monstrous children as well, beings of strength and dread. First came the Cyclops, each with a single eye burning like a forge in the center of their brow. They were the smiths of lightning, strong and simple. Then came the Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed ones, each of them enormous and terrible to behold, with 50 heads and 100 arms each. Uranus, though lord of the sky, trembled at the sight of these monstrous offspring. Ashamed and frightened by their grotesque strength, he forced them back into Gaia's womb, the depths of earth itself, and sealed them there, hidden away beneath layers of rock and grief. Gaia groaned beneath their weight. The earth, once proud and nurturing, now suffered. It was in this pain that she began to scheme. The union of Gaea and Uranus, earth and sky, was the first great marriage of the cosmos. But it had become a prison. The sky pressed down on the earth, holding her tightly, blind to her pain and death to her grief. She could endure no longer, and so from her own flesh she fashioned a weapon, not of bronze or iron, for such things had not yet been dreamed, but a great sickle of unyielding flint, jagged as truth and sharp as vengeance. Then she went to her Titan sons, the firstborn and mightiest, and laid bare her suffering. "Your father has wronged me," she said. "He has caged your brothers. He has silenced the womb that bore you. Who among you will aid me?" One by one they turned away, fearful of their father's might. All but one. Only Cronus, the youngest, the shrewdest, the one with watchful eyes and a patient heart, stepped forward. "I will do it," he said. "Give me the blade." So Gaea set the trap. She waited for Uranus to descend as he always did, laying himself across her in the dark. And from the shadows Cronus sprang. With a steady hand and no hesitation, he brought the sickle down upon his father. The sky shook with Uranus's cry as the blade bit deep, severing the source of his power. Cronus cast the bloodied flesh into the sea, and from the crimson foam that rose upon the waves, something new was born. A figure of impossible beauty, terrible and irresistible. From that white froth came Aphrodite, goddess of love and desire, who would later cause kings to fall and empires to burn. But Gaia's vengeance did not end with blood. From the droplets that fell upon the earth sprang other beings, the Furies, cloaked in shadow and vengeance, who would haunt oathbreakers and kinslayers until the end of days. And the giants, who in time would rise up against the gods themselves. Uranus, wounded and dethroned, vanished into the heavens. Before he fled, it is said he spoke a final curse, one that would ring through time. "Just as I was overthrown by my son, so too shall ye be overthrown by your own." It was not a prophecy he invented, but a truth Gaea had already whispered. And Cronus, the new king of the cosmos, heard it well. Thus ended the reign of Uranus, and began the age of the Titans. With Uranus cast down, the world breathed anew. The Titans, freed from their father's yoke, now stood tall. And Cronus, the youngest and cunning, claimed dominion over all. He took his sister, Rhea, as his wife, and together they ruled through a time that later poets would remember as a golden age. A time when mortals, newly created, lived in peace, free from suffering, untouched by winter or war. The fruits of the earth ripened without need for toil. It was an age of peace, But the king of the cosmos knew no peace. Cronus, who ruled all, was ruled by one thing: fear. The words of his dying father echoed through him like a second heartbeat, that he too would be cast down by his own child. He would not suffer the same fate as Uranus. He would not allow it. In time, Rhea began to bear children, and as each was born, Cronus remembered his father's curse. He did not hesitate. The moment Rhea placed each newborn in his arms, first Hestia, then Demeter, then Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, he opened wide his jaws and swallowed them whole. Not a trace was left. Not a cry, not a cradle, only the knowledge that they were gone, hidden within their father's belly like seeds in winter soil. Rhea, though proud and strong, was powerless. She wept, but her tears changed nothing. 5 times she gave birth, and 5 times she lost her children to the hunger of her husband's fear. But the 6th time she resolved to act. When she felt the child stir in her womb, she did not go to Cronus. She fled instead to the island of Crete, where deep caves opened beneath the earth. There, hidden among nymphs, she gave birth to her youngest son, Zeus. And from the moment of his birth, Rhea knew he was different. His cry shook the trees, his eyes opened before his first breath. To deceive Cronus, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and presented it to him. He swallowed it greedily, thinking the danger had passed. But beneath Mount Ida, the infant Zeus was nursed in secret. He was guarded by the Curetes, warriors who clashed their shields to drown out the sound of his cries, and fed by the goat Amalthea, whose milk gave him strength beyond measure. And as Zeus grew, so did the storm that would one day break the world. The age of Cronus held, but deep within the king, 5 children stirred in the dark, and far away, a child born in secrecy watched the stars and waited. In the hidden folds of Mount Ida, Zeus grew to manhood. Raised in secret, the blood in his veins was thick with prophecy, and his bones carried the weight of rebellion. As he came of age, Gaea herself began to stir. She remembered the betrayal of Cronus, who, despite his victory, had kept her other children, the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires, still buried deep in Tartarus. Her vengeance had not ended with Uranus. It had only been delayed. With words as old as stone, she guided Zeus. First, she led him to Metis, the Titaness of wisdom. With Metis's aid, Zeus fashioned a plan. To strike against a king of Titans and time would require more than strength. It would demand cunning. Zeus returned in disguise to the house of his father and offered Cronus a potion laced in wine. The drink stirred the old Titan's gut,
And at last, with a shudder and a groan, Cronus vomited forth the children he had swallowed long ago. They came not as infants, but full-grown and gleaming, clad in the strength of gods, reborn into a world poised for war. First, Hestia, hearth and flame. Then Demeter, goddess of the grain. Then regal Hera, proud and sharp-eyed. Then Hades, lord of the dead. And at last Poseidon, master of the deep. The 6 siblings stood together for the first time as one, and looked to the throne that had cast them into darkness. Cronus was not without allies. The Titans rallied to him, his brothers and sisters gathering atop Mount Othrys, the old seat of power. So began the war the poets called Titanomachy, the clash of Titans and Olympians.
For 10 years the battle raged without end. The sky darkened with storm and smoke. Thunder and fire echoed across the mountains. The war seemed endless, neither side able to land the final blow. But Gaea, ever watchful, knew the balance could not tip without what had been long buried. She counseled Zeus once more. If he were to win, he must descend into Tartarus and free his monstrous uncles. Zeus broke the gates of the underworld and released the imprisoned powers. The Cyclopes, grateful and eager, gifted Zeus his greatest weapons, the thunderbolt, the symbol of sky and storm. To Poseidon they gave the trident with which he would command the seas, and to Hades a helm of darkness that would make him unseen. The Hecatoncheires, giants with 100 hands, joined the fight at last, hurling mountains like stones and battering the Titans with the fury of ancient things unbound. With these allies, the tide turned. The Olympians pressed forward with a fury no Titan could match. Cronus fought to the last, but the prophecy, as always, unfolded without mercy. The Titans fell. One by one, they were driven down, cast from the high places of the earth. Zeus did not slay them. He imprisoned them, as his father had done before. Deep into Tartarus they were hurled, bound in chains forged by the 100-handed ones, behind bronze gates that would never rust or break. So ended the reign of the Titans. The throne passed to Zeus, not by birthright, but by might, wisdom, and fate fulfilled. The age of Olympus had begun.
When the war was over and the world lay quiet, the victors stood amidst the rubble of creation. The old order had been broken. Zeus, eldest among the gods now born again, stood at the center of this new age. But the old laws did not grant him sole dominion. He had 2 brothers, both tempered by war and strong in their own right. Poseidon, who had driven the sea to foam, and Hades, who had moved unseen through battlefield and cavern. And so the 3 gathered and cast lots to divide the realms of the world, not through bickering or force, but by fate itself. To Zeus fell the sky, the broad heavens. He became lord of thunder and rain, master of storm and cloud, and the undisputed king of Olympus. To Poseidon fell the sea, deep and restless. With his trident, he could shatter cliffs and stir the tides to rage or calm. To Hades fell the underworld, the land of the dead. He took it with quiet resolve, ruling the shadowed realm with stern dignity, keeping the balance between life and death. The earth itself was left as a common realm, shared by all. Thus the world was ordered: sky, sea, and underworld. On Mount Olympus, high above the clouds, Zeus called the gods to council. This was the new pantheon, 12 in number. Beside Zeus sat Hera, his sister and queen, goddess of marriage and childbirth. Proud and unyielding, her jealousy would shape the fates of gods and mortals alike. Demeter, goddess of the grain and growth, where her feet touched the earth, the soil softened and seeds stirred. Hutes, goddess of the hearth, the firstborn. She asked for no temple, no grand myths, only to tend the eternal flame in the center of Olympus. Then came the younger gods, born of this new age.
Athena, born not of womb, but from Zeus's own skull. She sprang forth fully grown, clad in bronze, spear in hand, goddess of wisdom, strategy, and just war. Apollo and Artemis, twins born of the Titaness Leto. Apollo, golden-haired, became the god of light, prophecy, music, and healing. His sister, Artemis, swift and silver, was goddess of the hunt, of wild things and moonlight. Ares, son of Zeus and Hera, god of war and slaughter. He was strength without discipline, rage without cause, and gloried in the chaos of battle. His opposite was Hephaestus, the lame god of the forge, master of craft and flame. Thrown from Olympus, he found solace in metal, building wonders with hammer and fire. Aphrodite, born of the foam, goddess of beauty and desire. Love, lust, jealousy, and ruin followed her wherever she went. And Hermes, the trickster and herald, son of Zeus, he moved swiftly between worlds, winged sandals at his feet. He was the messenger of the gods, guide of souls, patron of thieves and travelers. This was the Olympian court, a gathering not of saints, but of powers, raw, flawed, radiant, and vast. They quarreled, took sides in mortal affairs, fell in love, betrayed each other, and enacted divine justice. The age of Titans was gone. The age of Olympus now reigned. Long before men raised cities of marble, there were no humans upon the earth. The gods ruled alone. It was Prometheus, a titan of the old blood, who first imagined the shape of man. He had sided with Zeus in the Great War, not out of love, but out of foresight, for his name meant forethought. Some say he sculpted mankind from clay beside the banks of a river, his breath giving them life. But however it happened, the first men were made, and they were weak, naked beneath the sky, trembling in winter, defenseless against the beasts. Prometheus looked upon them and pitied them. He went to Olympus and asked that man be given a gift to help them survive. But Zeus refused. He saw in mortals not promise, but peril. "Let them live," he said, "but let them fear. Fire is the privilege of immortals." But Prometheus, stubborn and just, did not yield. In secret, he climbed to the heavens, stole a flame from the forge of Hephaestus, and hid it in a hollow fennel stalk. Carrying it down from Olympus, he gave it to man. For the first time, fire crackled beneath the stars. With fire came warmth, safety, cooking, metal, language, craft. Humanity, once cold and voiceless, began to build.
Zeus's fury was terrible. To punish mankind, he commissioned the gods to create a gift, a curse in disguise. Hephaestus shaped her from clay, a woman of perfect beauty. Aphrodite gave her charm. Hermes gave her cunning. Her name was Pandora, meaning all-gifted. And she was given a sealed jar containing the sorrows of the world. Disease, toil, grief, madness, envy, and death itself. She was sent to Prometheus, Prometheus's brother, whose name meant afterthought. Despite Prometheus's warnings, Prometheus took her in. And when Pandora, driven by curiosity, opened the jar, the evil spilled out into the world. Only hope remained inside, a flickering light amid the gloom.
You cannot break me, Hephaestus.
But Prometheus's punishment had not yet come. For the crime of defying Olympus, Zeus ordered him chained to a mountain at the edge of the world. There he was bound in unbreakable chains. Each day an eagle would descend and feast upon his liver. Each night it would grow back, and each morning the torment would begin again. He was immortal, and so the suffering could not kill him. And yet, even in chains, Prometheus did not repent. He waited, bound but unbowed, as men lit fires in the dark and told stories of the one who had dared to steal from the gods.
In the waning light between the age of gods and the age of men, there came a generation of mortals born from divine blood and mortal wombs. These were the demigods, the heroes. Their lives were brief, their fates often cruel, but their names would echo through time. Among the first and greatest was Perseus, son of Zeus. His tale began in prophecy and fear. His mother, Danae, was a princess of Argos. An oracle warned her father, King Heracles, that her daughter would bear a son destined to kill him. Heracles, fearing truth, locked Danae in a tower of bronze. But the gods laugh at mortal precautions. Zeus, in the form of golden rain, slipped through cracks no wall could keep.
From that union, Perseus was conceived. Acrisius, daring not spill royal blood, cast Danae and her infant son into the sea in a wooden chest. But the sea, guided by fate, brought them to the island of Seriphos. There, a humble fisherman named Dictys drew them ashore and raised Perseus as his own. But peace never lasts. The ruler of the island, King Polydectes, desired Danae. Perseus, now a man, stood in his way. Polydectes, in cunning, demanded a gift from all men. Perseus, poor and proud, boasted he would bring a greater prize, the head of Medusa, the mortal Gorgon, whose gaze could turn flesh to stone. The task was a death sentence, but the gods favored Perseus. Athena lent her shield, polished like a mirror, so he could look upon Medusa's reflection. Hermes gave him a curved sword and winged sandals. Perseus was guided to the Grey sisters, who shared a single eye, and stole it, bargaining for the path to the Gorgon's lair. Armed with divine gifts, including the helm of Hades, which made him invisible, Perseus flew to the ends of the earth. He found the Gorgons sleeping, ringed by the statues of those who had come before. Using the shield's reflection, he walked backward, and with one swift stroke, severed Medusa's head.
From her blood sprang Pegasus, the winged horse. As Medusa's sisters screamed, Perseus vanished into the mist. On his return, he passed the shores of Ethiopia, where he saw a maiden, Andromeda, chained to a rock as sacrifice to a sea monster. Perseus, beholding her beauty, slew the beast, some say by turning it to stone with the Gorgon's head, and claimed her as his bride. When he returned to Seriphos, he found Polydectes scoffing at his tale. Perseus reached into the sack and withdrew the severed head. The king and his court were turned to stone where they stood. But prophecy is not so easily undone. Years later, at funeral games, Perseus threw a discus. It veered, striking an old man in the crowd. It was Acrisius, his grandfather, who died without ever knowing his death was an accident, long foretold. If Perseus was the first great hero, Heracles was the mightiest. He was the great-grandson of Perseus and a son of Zeus. His birth was a trick. Zeus, disguised as the Theban general Amphitryon, lay with his wife, Alcmene, extending a single night into 3. From that union came Heracles, and from that union came the eternal wrath of Hera. Even in the cradle, Hera sought to destroy him, sending 2 serpents to strangle the infant. But the child reached out and throttled them both, one in each fist. Heracles grew into a man of impossible strength, but also wild restlessness. He married Megara, daughter of the Theban king, and for a time lived in peace. But Hera had not forgotten. In a fit of divine wrath, she clouded Heracles' mind with madness. Raging through his own halls, he slew his wife and children. When the madness passed and his vision cleared, he beheld the blood and ruin.
To atone, he sought out the Oracle of Delphi. The Pythia told him he must submit to the will of Eurystheus, king of Tyrans, and complete whatever tasks he set. Thus began the 12 labors, deeds so great and terrible, even the gods took notice.
He slew the Nemean lion, whose golden hide could not be pierced. He strangled it and wore its skin as armor. He slew the Lernaean Hydra, a serpent with 9 heads, 2 of which grew back for every one severed, aided by his nephew Iolaus, who cauterized the stumps. He captured the Cyrenian hind, a golden-horned deer sacred to Artemis, after chasing it for a year. He captured the Erymanthian boar, wrestling it in the snow. He cleaned the Augean stables, home to thousands of cattle, in a single day by rerouting 2 rivers. He drove away the Stymphalian birds, man-eating creatures with bronze beaks, using Athena's rattle. He captured the Cretan bull, a beast of divine origin.
The oracle requires your girdle.
He tamed the mares of Diomedes, flesh-eating horses, by feeding their master to them. He retrieved the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. He stole the cattle of Geryon, a triple-bodied giant at the edge of the world. He stole the golden apples of the Hesperides, tricking the Titan Atlas, the sky-bearer, into retrieving them while Heracles held the heavens. And the final most harrowing labor, he descended into Hades itself and brought back Cerberus, the 3-headed hound. With that final labor, his redemption was won. Yet Hera's hatred endured. In the end, it was not blade or monster that killed him, but the poisoned blood of the centaur Nessus, smeared on a tunic by his wife, Deianira, who believed it a love charm. As the poison burned through his flesh, Heracles built his own pyre. He was consumed by flame, but in death he was reborn. Zeus lifted him to Olympus, where he was granted immortality. He became the only mortal to join the pantheon, a god forged in agony.
If Heracles symbolized the strength of the body, Theseus embodied the strength of the mind. He was the founding spirit of Athens, a hero of governance as much as combat. Theseus was born of 2 fathers, King Aegeus of Athens and Poseidon, god of the sea. Raised far from Athens, he was told that when he was strong enough to lift a heavy stone and retrieve the sword and sandals beneath it, he could claim his birthright. In time, he did. Many would have traveled the easy road to Athens by sea, but Theseus chose the perilous land route, determined to earn his kingship. Along the way, he cleaned the land. He defeated Periphetes, the club-bearer. He slew Sinis, who tore travelers apart with bent pine trees. He overcame Scyron, who kicked travelers off cliffs, and Procrustes, who made beds fit travelers by stretching or cutting them. In Athens, he was a celebrated hero, but joy never lingered long in myths. For years, Athens had suffered under a bitter tribute. King Minos of Crete demanded 7 young men and 7 maidens be sent every 9 years to feed the Minotaur, a monstrous half-man, half-bull, born of Minos' pride and his wife's cursed lust. This creature was kept in a twisting labyrinth designed by the great inventor Daedalus. Theseus, learning of the tribute, volunteered himself. He would go not as a lamb to slaughter, but as a hunter. He promised his father Aegeus that if he succeeded, he would return with white sails upon his ship. If he failed, the sails would remain black. Upon arrival in Crete, Ariadne, daughter of Minos, saw Theseus and loved him. She gave him a gift, a ball of thread, and the secret to the labyrinth's winding paths. Theseus entered the maze. In its dark coils he found the beast, and with skill and blade struck the creature down. He followed the thread back into the light. He fled with Ariadne, but abandoned her on the island of Naxos. Some say Dionysus claimed her. Others say Theseus feared what a Cretan bride would mean. He continued home, but in his sorrow or his forgetfulness, he failed to change the sails. From the cliffs of Athens, King Aegeus saw black on the horizon and believed his son dead. Grief-stricken, he leapt into the sea, which still bears his name, the Aegean. Theseus became king, a builder of cities and laws, but his legacy, like all others, was stained by tragedy. While Theseus was a builder, Jason was a seeker. His quest for the golden fleece was a tale of ambition, brotherhood, and betrayal. Jason's father, the rightful king of the Olympus, had been usurped by his brother Peleus. Jason was sent away in secret, raised by the wise centaur Chiron. Years passed. Jason returned, a man clad in a single sandal. Peleus, remembering an oracle that warned him to beware the man with one shoe, saw him and paled. Peleus, too shrewd to strike openly, offered a test. He said, "Retrieve the golden fleece from the far land of Colchis, and I will yield the crown."
It was a suicidal mission. The fleece was nailed to an oak in a sacred grove, guarded by a serpent that never slept. But Jason accepted. He summoned the greatest heroes of his time: Heracles, Orpheus with his lyre, Atalanta the huntress, Castor and Pollux, and Theseus. 50 heroes in all. Together, they boarded a ship named the Argo. They sailed east into legend. They passed the Harpies who fouled Phineus's food. They rode between the deadly clashing rocks which slammed shut like jaws. At last, they reached Colchis. King Aeetes agreed to grant the fleece only if Jason completed impossible tasks: yoke fire-breathing bulls, plow a field and sow it with dragon's teeth, then defeat the warriors who would rise from the soil. It would have ended there had the gods not intervened. Medea, daughter of Aeetes, a priestess of Hecate, versed in dark magic, was struck by Eros's arrow. She fell in love with Jason. She gave him a potion to shield him from flame, taught him to trick the earthborn warriors into killing one another, and at last led him to the fleece. Medea sang spells, and the serpent slept. Jason seized the fleece and fled with Medea. As her father pursued them, Medea, to buy time, took her young brother, cut him into pieces, and scattered him in the sea.
forcing her father to stop and gather the limbs. The Argo slipped away, stained by crime and magic. When they returned to Iolcus, Peleus refused to yield. Medea, in vengeance, tricked his daughters into boiling him alive. Horrified, the people exiled Jason. He fled to Corinth, where he and Medea lived for years. But Jason, seeking legitimacy, cast Medea aside for a Corinthian princess. Medea, wronged, unleashed a fury no man could endure. She poisoned the bride's gown, burning her to ash. And then, in a final, horrifying act, she murdered her own sons by Jason. She fled in a chariot drawn by dragons. Jason, broken, returned to Iolcus. In his final days, he wandered, forgotten. One day, resting beneath the Argo, now dry-docked and decaying, a beam broke loose and struck his skull. So passed the great hero, not in battle, but in silence, beneath the bones of his past.
Where heroes battled monsters, some bloodlines battled fate itself. There are few in Greek myth more stained than the royal house of Thebes. Thebes began with Cadmus, a Phoenician prince searching for his sister Europa, who had been abducted by Zeus. The oracle at Delphi told him to abandon his search and follow a cow until it lay down. There he was to found a city. He did. But when his companions went for water, they were killed by a serpent sacred to Ares. Cadmus slew the serpent, and, at Athena's bidding, sowed its teeth into the soil. From the earth sprang armed warriors, the Spartoi, who turned on one another until only 5 remained. These 5 became the noble families of Thebes. Cadmus married Harmonia, daughter of Ares and Aphrodite. The gods themselves came to their wedding, but they received a cursed gift, a necklace forged by Hephaestus, a thing of beauty that would bring ruin to all who wore it. And so the doom of Thebes began. Generations passed. Cadmus's line was steeped in madness and murder. But it was through his great-great-grandson Laius that the true tragedy would unfold.
I will not abandon him to the storm.
Laius became king of Thebes and took Jocasta as his queen. An oracle came. If Laius ever had a son, that child would kill his father and marry his mother. When a son was born, Laius, terrified, ordered the infant's ankles pierced and bound, then gave him to a servant to be abandoned on a mountain. But the servant, pitying the child, passed him to a shepherd, who delivered him to the king and queen of Corinth. They named him Oedipus, meaning swollen foot, and never told him the truth. Oedipus grew into a clever and proud young man. Seeking truth about his birth, he journeyed to Delphi. The oracle gave him the same prophecy, that he would kill his father and marry his mother. Horrified, believing the king and queen of Corinth were his parents, Oedipus fled,
I will not yield the path to
unwittingly
you. Move
running
your
toward
chariot.
his
You
fate.
challenge the authority of a
On
king.
the road,
You will
at a
regret this
crossroads,
insolence.
he encountered an old, proud stranger. A quarrel broke out over the right of passage. In the heat of rage, Oedipus slew the man and his attendants. He had just killed his true father, Laius. He continued on to Thebes, which was under siege by the Sphinx, a creature who devoured all who failed to answer her riddle. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? Oedipus answered without hesitation, "Man."
Thebes is beset
The
by
Sphinx,
this cosmic
defeated,
light.
threw
Yet within
herself
these
from a
walls
cliff.
we shall endure.
Thebes rejoiced. The city's deliverer was made king, and in gratitude he was given the widowed queen as his bride, Jocasta, his mother.
You are the murderer,
Years
you
passed.
Your words
Oedipus
are
ruled
madness,
well
old man.
and had
I will
4
silence
children,
you.
but plague fell upon Thebes. The oracle proclaimed the land was cursed by unpunished blood. Slowly, terribly, the truth unraveled. The old man at the crossroads, the blind prophet Tiresias, who named the king as the killer, the scarred feet. Jocasta hanged herself. Oedipus took her brooches and blinded himself, piercing his own eyes. He wandered the land as a wretched figure, a man who sought the truth and was destroyed by it. The curse did not end. His sons Eteocles and Polynices fought for the throne, leading a war, the 7 against Thebes, that bathed the city in
Dare
blood.
defy my decree.
They slew each
You
other
think
in
Thebes is so
single
weak that a mere
combat.
girl can
His
break the
daughter
law?
Antigone was condemned and buried alive for daring to give her brother a proper burial. The house of Thebes was built on the bones of serpents and riddles, and no riddle, no matter how cleverly answered, can change the will of the gods. Of all the wars that ever ravaged mortal soil, none would echo louder than the one fought for a woman's face. A war of oaths, pride, beauty, and betrayal. It began not with spears, but with a wedding. The marriage of Peleus and Thetis, the sea nymph, fated to bear a son greater than his father. All gods were invited, save one, Eris, goddess of discord. In her fury, Eris cast into the feast a golden apple
Choose me,
inscribed
and I shall
with
grant
3
dominion over all
words,
of Asia.
"To the
I
fairest."
offer unmatched wisdom
The
and
apple was claimed by Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. To settle the dispute, they turned to a mortal shepherd prince, Paris, son of King Priam of Troy. One by one, they offered bribes. Hera promised kingship over all men. Athena pledged wisdom and victory in war. But Aphrodite offered him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world.
We are honored to receive
Paris
you in our
chose
halls.
love. The prize was Helen of Sparta, daughter of Zeus. Her mortal father, King Tyndareus, fearing the war her hand would spark,
had bound all her suitors with a sacred oath. Whoever won Helen, all the others would swear to defend that union. Menelaus, king of Sparta, won her hand. But when Paris came to Sparta as a guest, he violated the sacred trust. Whether she went willingly or was taken, the poets disagree. But when Paris sailed back across the Aegean, Helen was with him. In that hour, the war began.
Menelaus raged. He called upon the oath, and all who had sworn it answered. Agamemnon, his brother, king of Mycenae. Odysseus of Ithaca, clever and reluctant. Ajax the Greater, towering and grim. Diomedes of Argos, brave and battle-hungry.
The silver stag
And
of Artemis demands
Achilles,
sacrifice.
son of
Blood must
Thetis,
flow upon the
the
altar,
greatest
or Troy
warrior
will
alive,
never fall.
fated to die young and determined to make that death matter. They gathered at Aulis, a fleet of 1,000 ships. But the winds did not rise. The prophet Calchas revealed that Artemis had been offended. Only a great sacrifice would appease her. The name he spoke was Iphigenia, daughter of Agamemnon. The king killed his own child for the sake of war. The winds came, the fleet sailed
Mighty
east.
Apollo, heed the cries
For
of your
10
servant.
years,
Let
they
the
camped
Achaeans pay for
beneath
this
the walls
injustice.
of
You
Ilium,
belong to me now,
the great
priestess.
city
Come with the
of
gods.
Troy.
No, please, I
The
beg
gods
you.
chose sides. Hera and Athena with the Greeks. Aphrodite, Ares, and Apollo with the Trojans. The war dragged on. In the 10th
Since you have
year,
taken my
a
prize,
quarrel
consider your
shattered
greatest
the
warrior
Greek
withdrawn.
alliance.
I will watch from the heights as
It
your
began
armies fall.
over a woman. Agamemnon, forced to give up his captive, Chryses, demanded Achilles' prize, Briseis, as compensation. It was a slight Achilles could not endure. He rose in fury and swore an oath. He would no longer fight for the Greeks. Let them bleed without him. And so he withdrew to his tent.
We are lost.
Without
Forward,
Achilles, the
Show them
tide
no
turned. The Trojans, led by Hector, son of Priam, shield of the city, a noble man who carried the burden of his people, pushed the Greeks back to the sea. Ships were set ablaze. Patroclus, friend and companion of Achilles, watched the losses mount.
Achilles, they
He
are
begged
dying.
Achilles
The
to let him
Trojans push us
fight in
back
his
to the
stead.
ships.
He
If you will
wore
not
the
fight, then let
hero's
me wed.
armor and led the Myrmidons into battle. But Patroclus, flushed with borrowed glory, went too far. He reached the gates of Troy, and there he met Hector. Their duel was brutal. Patroclus fell beneath Hector's spear. When Achilles learned of his death, his grief shook the camp. He did not weep, he howled. He returned to battle, not for glory, but for vengeance. His mother Thetis brought him new armor, forged by Hephaestus himself. Then Achilles went to war. No one could stand against him. He chased Hector around the walls of Troy 3 times before they met in single combat.
Hector fought bravely, but Achilles was a fire no water could quench. He struck Hector down. In his rage, he dragged the body behind his chariot, circling the city, denying the prince the dignity of burial.
Achilles, remember
It was
your own
Priam,
father and
the
pity
old
me.
king
I
who
beg
brought an
you,
end to that
return my son to
madness.
me.
Guided by Hermes, he crept into the Greek camp and knelt before Achilles, kissing the hands that had killed his son. He spoke not as a king, but as a father. And Achilles, at last, wept. He returned Hector's body, but peace was fleeting. Achilles would not survive the war. A poisoned arrow, fired by Paris, guided by Apollo, struck his heel, the only vulnerable part of him. He died in the dust, young and unmatched.
The war had bled the land dry. 10 years of siege. The greatest heroes were dead. Troy, once golden, stood. The Greeks grew weary. Then, just as the gods began to turn their gaze elsewhere, the Greeks vanished. At dawn, the Trojans saw no sails upon the sea. The ships were gone.
Trojans, do not trust this
In their
horse.
place,
I fear the Greeks,
on the
even
plain
bearing
outside
gifts.
the
This is a threat.
Scaean gate,
Destroy it now.
stood a colossal wooden horse. No soldiers stirred. The war, it seemed, had ended. Only Laocoon, priest of Poseidon, spoke the truth. Beware, Greeks, bearing gifts, he warned, and hurled a spear into its side. But in that moment, as if the gods themselves had tired of warning men, a pair of sea serpents rose from the surf and crushed Laocoon and his sons. The people, seeing this, called it a sign. With ropes and wheels, with cheers and hymns, they brought the horse inside their walls. That night, while the city feasted, a trapdoor in the belly of the beast opened. Out came Odysseus, Menelaus, Diomedes, and others. At the same hour, the Greek fleet, hidden on a nearby isle, returned silently. What followed was not war, it was slaughter. Neoptolemus, the son of Achilles, killed Priam at the altar of Zeus. Cassandra was dragged screaming from Athena's temple. Astyanax, Hector's infant son, was thrown from the walls, so no heir might one day rise. Temples were desecrated, women taken. The city of Troy was given to flame. When dawn rose, nothing remained but smoke and ash. The walls that had defied 10 years of siege fell in a single night.
But the war did not end cleanly. The victors carried their own curses. Agamemnon, returning home with Cassandra, was murdered in his bath by his wife Clytemnestra, who had never forgiven the sacrifice of Iphigenia. The house of Atreus bled on as his son Orestes returned to kill his mother, hounded by the Furies. Menelaus and Helen wandered long, driven to Egypt, before returning to Sparta to rule in uneasy silence. But it was Odysseus, the man who contrived the horse whose journey became the most storied. He sailed not for home, but into a 10-year trial by sea, caught between the wrath of Poseidon and the whims of fate. His ship was hurled from island to island. He blinded Polyphemus, the Cyclops, son of Poseidon. He dallied with Circe, the sorceress, who turned his men into swine. He was kept as a lover by the nymph Calypso for 7 long years. He journeyed to the edge of the underworld, spoke with the dead, and heard the song of the sirens tied to the mast. He lost all his men to storm and folly. At last, he returned to Ithaca, alone, in rags. There, in his absence, suitors had overrun his house, plotting to marry his wife, Penelope, who had waited, weaving and unweaving the same shroud. Odysseus, with the help of his son Telemachus and the bow only he could string, slew the suitors one by one. Blood filled the great hall. The fall of Troy was not just the end of a city, it was the end of an age, the heroic age. The heroes who returned found broken homes, bitter wives, and hostile gods. In the end, there were no victors, only survivors.
Even the gods are not immortal. Not in memory, not in reverence. There comes a moment where the divine grows quiet, where thrones built in thunder are worn smooth by time. For the gods of Olympus, that slow retreat began not with war, but with Rome. The Romans did not destroy the Greek gods, they adopted them. Zeus became Jupiter, Hera became Juno, Poseidon, Neptune, Ares, Mars. They gave them new names, folded their myths into Roman values: order, hierarchy, empire. Jupiter thundered not from a wild peak, but from the Capitoline hill, dressed in the robes of a lawgiver. The wildness of Dionysus became the cultured Bacchus. In literature, the myths lived on. Ovid retold the tales. Virgil, in the Aeneid, made the gods instruments of fate, pulling strings behind Rome's founding. As Aeneas, a survivor of Troy, carried its embers west. But something had shifted. In Homer, the gods strode the battlefield, naked in their passions. In Roman myth, they had become symbolic, distant. As the empire expanded, it met new gods. From the east came Mithras, from Egypt, Isis, and from Judea, a single invisible god. One who forbade images and made no room for divine siblings or thunder-wielding kings. Philosophy, too, eroded the mythic world. Plato suggested the gods must be perfect and good, not the jealous, lustful figures on Olympus. Epicurus declared the gods existed, but took no interest in human affairs. And then came the final blow: Christianity. Once a persecuted sect, it spread across the empire, carried by a new story, not of lovers and vengeance, but of sin and salvation. Its god was singular and omnipotent. In time, its temples replaced the old ones. Its hymns drowned out the lyres. By the reign of Theodosius I, pagan temples were closed by law. The Olympic Games were abolished. The gods did not resist. There was no final war between Zeus and Christ. The Olympians simply faded. Their statues stood, weathered and silent. Their altars went cold. The myths remained, but as literature, not faith. And yet, they endured. They returned in Renaissance paintings, in Enlightenment philosophy, in modern retellings. Carl Jung saw the gods as archetypes within the human mind. Rick Riordan reimagined them for children in Manhattan. What the Greeks gave us was not just a pantheon, but a framework, a way to explain the world, to wrestle with death, to understand the self. Their gods were flawed, yes, but gloriously so. In them, we saw not perfection, but potential. The agony of choice, the thrill of risk, the pain of hubris. The gods may have left Olympus, but they never truly left us. They walk quietly now, in books and songs, in dreams and memories. In every tale that dares to reach beyond the mortal veil, they are not dead. They have simply moved.